I'm going to talk on the lower and middle Paleolithic cultures of the Indian subcontinent. Now, before I go on to discussing these cultures, let me first use certain terms and explain how we archaeologists define them. The first term that I'm going to talk about is culture. In archaeology, this term is used when similar assemblage of tools, ornaments, and other products of human labor or artifacts are found in a layer in one or more sites, along with indicators of similar customs and beliefs in systems of disposal of the dead and ritual symbols. A particular chronological phase or period is important here. So that is how we say, when we find such things together, that this belongs to a Upper Paleolithic or a Lower Paleolithic or a Mesolithic culture. The next term that we use very frequently is the term site. How do we define a site? Site is an area with definite boundaries bearing certain constituents like artifacts, which are basically man-made tools, ecofacts, which are old plant and animal remains, structural remains, for example, remains of old houses and things, and if there are any remains of features like a house floor. Now, what do we mean by artifacts? I mentioned artifacts are basically tools which are made by man. Now, in a site you find many artifacts. We are not only talking about the end products, but we are talking about the entire manufacturing sequence. For example, from the beginnings, from the first stage when the raw material nodule is used, which is to be manufactured into the finished tool. Now, all the artifacts found together in a site or a group of sites, together they are called an assemblage. What is typology? Typology is something that is determined by the morphological characteristics of the stone tools. For example, if we say the typology of Acheuleans, what do they look like? Basically, the physical features. Technology is the technique of production, as well as looking at all stages of manufacturing of these artifacts. Industry is a term that we use when we say a lower Paleolithic industry or a lower Upper Paleolithic industry, again meaning a particular kind of technique of production and its products in one particular cultural phase or period. Since we are dealing with a time very, very remote in antiquity, geology becomes a very important subject for the prehistorians. Geological terms which are frequently used in prehistory, I would like to mention some of these. Before that, let me just inform you about something. That is, the formation of the earth is dated to 4600 million years ago. Geological ages are formed of eras and epochs or series. Here we are mainly concerned with the Quaternary epoch, with which the evolution of human species is linked. This Quaternary is divided into two, the Pleistocene and the Holocene. Holocene is the present time that we are living in. Pleistocene began about 1.8 million years ago. In fact, that is one part of the Pleistocene, and then we have Holocene, which began about 10,000 years ago. Now, the standard divisions of Pleistocene are based on 4 to 5 major glaciations or ice ages and the intervals or interglacials between them. Now, this is something which was assumed before. This is the kind of framework that people talked about before when one talked about geological time period in relation to stone tools, that there are 4 ice ages, 4 to 5 major ice ages, and that there are intervals in between. This framework has now been abandoned. The glaciation phases have been found to be much more numerous and varied. Another thing that we are very concerned with is the paleo-environment. Now, what is a paleo-environment? Paleo means old and environment is basically the old environment. How do we understand this environment? Now here let me just say one thing, that archaeology is very much a multidisciplinary subject. So here when we are looking at paleo-environment, we have to take help of various sciences to understand past temperature, rainfall, humidity. These leave behind their signatures in various living and non-living materials. For example, in trees, in ice cores, in lakes, in coastal and ocean deposits, in alluvial and fluvial deposits, and colluvial deposits. Okay? So these are the various things that give us an idea of the paleo environment in which we have to place these very, very old cultures. Another thing, since I said that this is a multidisciplinary subject, another thing that we have to be concerned with is anthropology. Archaeology and anthropology are very much interlinked. Now you might wonder that how can we talk of anthropology, how do we use anthropological data when we are looking at cultures which are very, very old? Actually, we try to see how far modern ethnographic studies of present-day indigenous groups, how far they give an insight into past habitation patterns, into past technology, into past living patterns. So this is something that we also have to take into consideration when we are dealing with archaeological cultures. Now here I'll be showing you some very typical stone tools, pictures of typical stone tools associated with the Lower Paleolithic. The first picture is that of a hand axe. Hand axe is, and this hand axe is found from the site, very famous site in England, in southern England, called Boxgrove. And the next picture you are seeing is basically of hand axes from North Africa. Now I think we all know, we all learn as students in school that human evolution first started in Africa. That is why North Africa, East Africa, these are very, very important places to understand the beginning of our origins. These are two other pictures of blade cores and the blades produced from such blade cores. Then this blade of obsidian, obsidian is a very typical raw material that is used in Europe. I'll be talking about the blade technology later when I'll be talking to you about the Upper Paleolithic and the Mesolithic cultures. The next picture that you are seeing is the landscape around Lake Turkana, East Africa, which is an area of very rich Stone Age sites. Now I'm just giving you a picture of this landscape because so that you will get an idea that in what kind of setting you find these Stone Age sites. Before I go into discussing the Lower Paleolithic and the Middle Paleolithic cultures of the Indian subcontinent, let me give you an idea of the human evolution. First, you have the Australopithecus 4 to 5 million years ago. Then you have the Homo habilis 2 million years ago. Earliest stone tools date from about 2.5 million years ago. Makers are unknown. Early tool kits are called Oldovan. Then you have the Homo erectus in this ladder of evolution, dated to 1.6 million years ago. They were the makers of Acheulean tools. Then you have the Homo sapiens, which coincides with Middle Paleolithic cultures, 200,000 to 40,000 years before present. Then you have the Neanderthal, 130,000 to probably 30,000 years before present. There is a lot of recent research on the Neanderthal, which is helping us to rethink about these species. Then you have the Homo sapiens sapiens. We are the modern Homo sapiens sapiens. They arrive, or you can find them in Africa by 100,000 years before present. They reached the Eastern Mediterranean around 100,000 to 90,000 years before present, and Europe and Asia by at least 40,000 years before present. Now, what about the outline of Lower Paleolithic cultures in the Indian subcontinent? As I told you, cultures have to be situated in their topographic and climatic settings, so ecology is a very important thing. I'll be talking about this when I'll be discussing different kinds of sites found from different parts of India situated in different ecozones. Now, many fossil finds and a few absolute dates suggest that at least 1 million years ago, Homo erectus was well established in Java and soon in North China. He could have reached these lands only by crossing the Indian subcontinent. Unfortunately, we have a real paucity of fossil remains in the Indian subcontinent, possibly because preservation is very low in a hot and humid, moist environment like ours. Only in Narmada Valley, we find a whole lot of fossil remains, and Narmada Valley is very important from the context of fossil remains. Earliest dates from cultural remains. A date of 1.2 million years ago has been found from a tooth enamel from the site of Isampur, North Karnataka. So far, we can take this as the earliest date in Indian prehistory. At Bori in Maharashtra, Paleolithic artifacts were found in a gravel which cuts into ash bed at a number of sections. The dating of tephra ash found from this gravel is taken to be the same date as for the Acheulean artifacts, which is 0.5 million years ago. Now, this is a very controversial thing, and it is still being controversial, it's still shrouded in controversy, but the early date cannot be ignored. Late Pliocene dates of artifacts, which is earlier than Pleistocene, artifacts from Shivalik Hills at Reward near Rawalpindi, Pakistan, but these are also very controversial. Before a survey of Paleolithic cultures is undertaken, we have to remember one thing, that is, traditions do overlap. The transition from one stage to another was not sudden. So the transition from Lower Paleolithic to Middle Paleolithic, which signified a change in technology, a change in a different kind of pattern of life, that was not sudden. That did not happen overnight. Because after all, we are dealing with human beings, right? If we look at chronology, I already mentioned the earliest date. Lower Paleolithic as early as 1.2 million years ago, dates of more than 390,000 years before present at Didwana, Rajasthan. Nevasa is considered to be greater than 350,000 years before present. In Karnataka, Yedurvari, Upper Krishna Valley, the dates are earlier than 358,000 years before present. Middle Paleolithic, 144,000 or 150,000 TL date, that is thermoluminescence dates. Unfortunately, we do not have too many dates from Middle Paleolithic in the Indian subcontinent. Upper Paleolithic or Microlithic is 41,900 years before present, or perhaps even older. Many dates occur between 27,000 to 25,000 years before present and 12,000 to 10,000 years before present. The Mesolithic or the Microlithic dates fall between 12,200 plus minus 410 to 390 BC at Mahagara. Other calibrated dates are found from Bagor. Older dates are found from Sri Lanka. There are some recent dates from Jwalapuram, this site in Andhra Pradesh. It's a very recent find which came out in Antiquity in 2009. The date is about 35,000 years before present. Now, why I am saying Upper Paleolithic or Microlithic, Mesolithic or Microlithic, that might create some confusion in you. I will deal with this confusion later when I look at the Upper Paleolithic and Mesolithic industries of the Indian subcontinent. Basically, I think for this lecture, it is important to remember that we are dealing with the blade technology when we are looking at Upper Paleolithic as well as the Mesolithic. Now, the lower Paleolithic cultures and occupation of different ecozones in the Indian subcontinent, we find these cultures distributed in different parts of the Indian subcontinent, in different ecozones. In semi-arid western Rajasthan, in Rohri hills northwestern Sindh, in the Indian Shivalik belt, in river valleys in Gujarat, associated with meteorite deposits in Saurashtra, in the subhumid, dry and moist deciduous woodland zones of central India, in the Vindhyan hilly region, in the Middle Son Valley, in the Belan Valley, in tributary river valley deposits in Maharashtra, Karnataka, in the Konkan coast, in the Hungski Bejwal Valley, which is one of the most significant research projects that happened in Indian prehistory. Also, lower Paleolithic cultures are found in ferricrete and ferruginous colluvial deposits, in stream and sheet flood deposits in Tamil Nadu, in coastal and inland regions of Andhra, in the core and periphery of Chotanagpur region. So you can make out that I am talking about different kinds of contexts of these cultures, okay, and this context is important. Now, this is just a map showing the distribution of lower Paleolithic sites in India, which has been taken from a very important article of Vidya-mitra that came out in 1989 in the Man and Environment. Now, you can see that lower Paleolithic sites are distributed almost all over in the Indian subcontinent in different ecozones. Not so much in the northeast, we have to remember that. What kind of information has been derived about the Paleo-environment? A lot of multidisciplinary projects were undertaken, particularly by Deccan College, Pune, which is a premier institute in Asia. Here, Dr. Mishra and Dr. Rajguru's work in Didwana, Rajasthan was very important, because there they were getting this one site called Didwana, and where the profile was called 16-hour profile. They were getting this entire sequence from lower Paleolithic to Mesolithic in one stratigraphy in one site. Now, different ecological settings are pointing to different types of environment. I just mentioned the Didwana in semi-arid Rajasthan. Best evidence of climatic changes and human responses to them, therefore, during this period, therefore, comes from this place in Rajasthan and this semi-arid zone of Rajasthan. In peninsular India, Acheulean artifacts are mainly found buried in bouldery and pebbly gravels deposited in a semi-arid environment with intermittent erratic rainfall and sparse vegetation cover. Now, what about the technology during the lower Paleolithic? Lower Paleolithic in the Indian context is represented by what is called the Sohanian tradition, represented by pebble tools, flakes at cores, and the Acheulean, represented by bifaces like hand axes, this picture that I showed to you before, cleavers, pebble tools, scrapers, flakes, blades, and core. Now, these are the first picture is basically cores of the Sohanian tradition. Just to give you a very brief thing, that basically first what happens is you have a raw material nodule that you're fashioning into what we call a core. The core can be used as a tool like these, or from the core you are making other finished tools. Okay. Now, in the second picture we have what are called disc coils. Okay. These are two typical tools of the Sohanian tradition. Now, before I go into the Middle Paleolithic cultures, now let me just tell you that this was a very basic outline of lower Paleolithic cultures which I wanted to give to you. There are a lot, we have to remember one thing, that is there's a lot of regional variation of this culture found in different parts of the Indian subcontinent. Okay? Next we come to the Middle Paleolithic cultures. This developed during the Upper Pleistocene. The last interglacial, there was the sea level was very high. There was a warm, humid climate in India. Not much data on the paleo-environment is available in India at present. Cooling, that is temperature, started around 75 to 70,000 years ago, 70,000 years before present globally, and that affected Indian summer monsoons, overall lowering of sea levels. In general, these Middle Paleolithic populations occupied the same regions and habitats as the preceding Acheulean population, were also seen in some other sites as well. Ecological settings, we find them at open-air sites, along perennial and seasonal streams, along hill slopes, on stable dune surfaces, and in rock shelters. Samnapur is a very important site which was discovered, which was excavated by Vidya-mitra, again from Deccan College, Pune, and that remains one of the very well excavated Middle Paleolithic sites in the Indian subcontinent. Now, faunal remains were recovered from different sites, which suggest a savanna grassland during this time, interspersed with swamps and forests. What about the technology? We just had a look at Acheulean, which is those hand axes, Swannian, those cores, discoids. Now, what is happening? There is a gradual change happening in technology. Again, we have to remember that change does not happen overnight. We see a limited use of these tools that I showed you pictures of, which are called bifaces. Bifaces means both faces of the stone being worked. That is basically what is meant by a biface. So we see that there is a limited use of these bifaces and heavy core tools. Tools are now made more on flakes and blades, which is becoming common. We will see more fashioning of these blade technology from the Upper Paleolithic. But already we are seeing some of these very heavy, thick blades being produced in the Middle Paleolithic culture. Tools are becoming thinner and lighter. You have a particular use of a particular technique called the Levallois technique or the prepared core technique, which is seen now. What about the choice of raw material? Before, in the Lower Paleolithic, we saw that quartz, quartzite and basalt were used. Even now we see that quartz, quartzite and basalt were continuing, supplemented in varying degrees by chert, jasper and other fine-grained rocks. Raw material was also brought from considerable distances, as we see at Samnapur. Now, why is this thing about raw material being brought from a distance? How could this be important? This is very important in terms of human behavior. We are now basically dealing with the Homo sapiens, maybe not Homo sapiens sapiens, but Homo sapiens. So, if they were not finding stone to make tools from in their near vicinity, definitely they were using their cranial capacity to exercise a choice that they could get their raw material from a distance. So this is important when we are thinking in terms of human mobility across the landscape. Okay? We see from the Middle Paleolithic onwards this thing of bringing raw material from a distance. We are meeting with more and more evidence of this from around the world, and even in Indian subcontinent we do find some evidence of this.